Well, welcome to the Burn Up Podcast. I'm honored to have a good friend of mine here that we've met here in the last year and spent a lot of time together. Ted Stern with Fit Responder. Ted,
Hello.
Ted, welcome for being here on the Burn Up Podcast. So, before we get into this, I want to give a little intro. Last year sometime, I was, as I was getting ready to enter into the health and wellness space, I was looking to potentially open a wellness center. And as I was getting online and looking at some different companies, happened to find, come across Fit Responder. Ted at the time had put some feelers out just to see if there was some interest and some potential partners. And it was this moment, and maybe some of you have had this moment. It was this moment almost like God grabbed me and said, "Hey, you need to look at this." And, as I got into it and started looking at things, in many ways, after going through a pretty significant career change and a lot of pain and trauma associated with that, it was, I joked that it was like almost having sex for the first time in 3 years because I just got really excited. And, you and I hit it off and we started having different conversations and one thing led to another. So I've actually partnered with Ted and his team, who has had tremendous success in the health and fitness space, working with first responders. Ted himself is a retired police officer. We're going to get into a lot of that. But I've been very impressed with the work that his team has done and the amazing transformations that literally you've worked with thousands of people. And yeah, so we're going to get into it. So welcome today. And Ted, again, welcome thanks for being here on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Looking forward to it. And I'm excited to talk about a lot of cool stuff. Let's get to it.
So again, you're a cop. How did you even get into being a personal trainer?
My dad was into lifting weights and, growing up, I watched the Arnold movies and in G.I. Joes, and just, I think like a lot of boys just felt myself drawn to kind of like the strong and masculine figure. And, somewhere around 18 years old, I started to get into working out finally. That's a long story, but then, I just wanted to help people kind of transform in the way I did. Like it changed a lot of my personality and a lot of my life to get fit and strong and all that. But not to, get into too much with it, but at 24 years old is when I found myself actually out of shape and overweight. And we can get into that story, but after getting in better shape, that was when I was really on fire for helping people, because I just saw how it transformed me, not just my health, but my mindset and how I felt. So that was a big inspiration for me. It's just like, I want other people to kind of experience the same transformation. And people ask too, they're like, "Man, you look like you've changed a lot. Like you're in great shape. What did you do?" So it just kind of became natural for me to share that. And then just, momentum over time, just the number of people who were happy about the results and started telling other people about it. And, people asking them, "How did you get in shape? What did you do?" It's a nice business to be in, because people who get in shape just end up being like walking billboards for you. I like when I was younger as an 18, 19-year-old, I trained people kind of here and there, focused more on my college and then police career at 21 years old. But in my mid-20s, got out of shape, got in better shape, and that's when I really got on fire for helping people.
Yeah. Obviously, when someone goes through a physical transformation, I myself have gone through a pretty radical one, losing well over 100 pounds. And, and of course, it's a visual thing when people say, "Oh my gosh, look, you've changed." But it's so much more than that, right? Yeah. It's the confidence that embodies. It's all of a sudden you have this new sense of self-love. A lot of people that have struggled with weight tie a lot of their worth to that. That was something really big for me for most of my life. And you just have a different energy. You walk differently. People just notice you more when you do that. And I've found, I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to people that are in shape, right? And of course, the physical component of it, but for me, it's more the energy. It's more the confidence. It's not about saying I'm this or that. It's just a matter of being, you know? So I can imagine too, when people saw you go through your transformation, obviously you look different, but you had a completely different energy about you.
Yeah. And I didn't really realize that at the time. And honestly, when I started helping people, my thoughts were, okay, people want to look better in a bathing suit and they want to be healthier. And I help a lot of first responders. They want to be safe on the job. But what I started noticing after coaching a lot of people is they would say things like, "My relationship is better now," or "I got that promotion," or, I finally got the confidence to pursue XYZ. And you're right. Like, it's more than just the aesthetics. People, like, once you get in better shape, I think that confidence, that momentum can inspire you. You'll have more energy. It's as much or even more a mindset and mental change than it is a physical one.
Yeah, 100. And I think it's as much. It's more mental and emotional than it is actually even, being a caloric deficit and doing all the workouts and all the things. Because at the end of the day, the formula to get in shape isn't overly complicated. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? But yet the majority of Americans are overweight. Our obesity rate, is well in excess of 30% here in the United States. I mean, a large percentage of the population is overweight, and many are extremely overweight. And again, the formula is simple, but yet I believe most people, all of us in one form or another, have an unhealthy attachment to food, and people use food as an addiction and to manage their emotions. And it's learning new tools and new ways of coping with that. And much of the weight that we carry is emotional. And again, when you really are working on all of it, the mindset, the emotional side, and also following a plan, eating healthy, I mean, the weight just will naturally come off.
100%. Yep.
So how long were you a police officer for?
So, police officer, deputy sheriff, basically same thing. I was a cop, a deputy sheriff for about 11 years. Started when I was 21, and worked a lot of cool assignments. You start in the academy, went to the jail, worked the jail for a good period of time, patrol, detectives, marijuana eradication team. There's actually a good purpose for that team though. And then, worked at the academy. I'm smiling about the marijuana eradication team because since then, obviously, like marijuana is like legal and a bunch of people do it. But
you were a cop in California, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
But cartels would grow these illegal marijuana operations in the hills, and it would destroy like the surrounding environment. And there'd be guys with guns out there. So it was a worthy fight. But yeah, I had a lot of different assignments. I still miss being a cop. There's a lot of great aspects of the career, but I mean, I can't beat what I'm doing now. And just,
what do you miss most about being a cop?
It's like, it's kind of like part of your identity. If you do it for long enough too, you're like, I'm a cop, and I like working with some of the partners I did, and there's exciting stuff and new stuff all the time. What drew me to being a cop is I always liked how a good cop or a good first responder is somebody who can go into a crazy situation where everyone else is crying and freaking out, and they are the calm and collected badass who's like, all right, you go there. Hey, we're doing this. And I just thought like, man, what's cooler than that? Like somebody who can be confronted with the most difficult and stressful circumstances and they just act like a boss. And so, I mean, there were times, I didn't get into anything too gnarly. But I mean, there were times, right, where you can act that part. And I kind of miss that. And I miss, there's creative ways to help people as a cop, like even dumb stuff, like somebody loses their wallet. And then I go through all these things to figure out, where they're at. And I just show up at their door. They're like, who's this cop? I'm like, here's your wallet. Oh my God, thank you. Or returning somebody's runaway child to them, bigger things like that. Or, helping save somebody, like the gratitude in those moments. Cause it's oftentimes a thankless career, but I miss that aspect as well. But I get a lot of that as a fitness coach too. People thanking me for helping them and all that.
So you said something that I'd love to go deeper on. Much of the work that I do with the men that I work with as a transformational coach is around changing the story that we tell ourselves. Because I believe everything's rooted in a story, right? Fear, limiting belief. I mean, all the different things that are there. And I'm curious, like you mentioned, like missing that component of it where you enter a stressful, maybe it wasn't gnarly as some other, first responders have faced, but nevertheless, you've seen a lot of shit. You've faced, a lot of things that most people don't see or deal with. Yet, how does one show up in that? Again, when there is risk, there may be life-threatening, things, but yet you have to show up. I mean, I think it's a choice. You're choosing to show up that way, but I'm sure there were moments, not only for you personally, but other, people that you worked with were scared shitless to go into a situation like that. But yet, how do you approach those situations and be able to kind of shelve the fear or just get into that mindset as far as like, not letting the fear cripple you in a very scary situation?
It's a good question. And, there's two kind of layers to that. Like one is how can somebody just naturally handle stress? And also how trained is somebody in handling stress? And I've seen incidents, and there was a major incident in our department, a active shooter incident where lots of people died. And I've seen major incidents where cops and first responders chicken out, and they don't step up. And I think a lot of people assume, well, hey, if there's a cop, like they're going to do the right thing. But we've seen incidents around the country where they don't, because ultimately in the end, they're just human beings. And we all like to think, oh, if I was confronted with this XYZ circumstances, here's how I would behave. But you don't really know till you're in it. And I got to just say, I'd love to take credit and say, hey, I did whatever to prepare myself to be somebody who can act under stress. But I've always just kind of naturally been the person to rush in and want to be the hero. And there was times I got in trouble as a cop for just rushing in and just wanting to handle it. And I don't know, I kind of liked that excitement. In my 20s, like I really liked the adrenaline, and it was almost like I would gravitate toward it. Like if there was a pursuit, I wanted to get in it. Like, let me get involved. Let me go. Oh, there's a fight. I want to get in it. Like I want to be the one to rush in. But that's not natural or innate. So, not that this is the direction of the conversation, but agencies and police departments need to do a better job of vetting people to make sure they're the type, but especially training them to be the type to handle stress, doing more scenarios, more practical things to get that stress inoculation, right? Where, they're presented with a stimuli, something that's exciting, scary, intimidating, and they have to act. And we didn't get enough of that testing, in my opinion, in the training. And I don't think cops around the country get enough of that. Our academies are too short. First responders have arguably one of the toughest careers there are. I mean, you got to act in intense moments under incredible stress. And we expect people to do excellently with, split-second life-changing decisions after they've had a few months of training in an academy. But yeah, just to answer your question, I think there's that natural element. Somehow, for whatever reason, I'm just kind of that type to just go in there and handle it. I think some of it's training, definitely. But, some people have it and some people don't. But yeah, to be honest, there's a lot of first responders who don't.
What's interesting too, I mean, again, having gone through some pretty wild experiences and events in my life, you'll hear people like, well, I wouldn't have done that if I was you, and I wouldn't have done this or that. And it's like, the truth of the matter is none of us really know unless you're actually in that position. What's coming to mind as I'm hearing you talk is, I don't know how many years ago, this was like 15 years ago. It was a night where I never keep my truck unlocked, let alone keep my stuff in it. And it was one night I was in watching a movie with family or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I left my truck open. I got to get my stuff. So I walked out to my truck that was parked in the driveway, and my brother-in-law at the time was staying with us, and I walk out and the passenger door's open, and I think it's my brother-in-law. I'm like, what the hell's he doing in my car? And as I got closer, I'm like, oh, that's not my brother-in-law. So someone's in my truck stealing stuff. So I start approaching him, and this big guy stumbles out and then, and is coming towards me, starts to reach his hands in his pockets. Like, I think he's grabbing something, and I'm just like backing up, yelling at the guy, then he runs off. Then there was this get-up car, or basically a pickup car, picked him up and they took off, and so after the fact, people are like, well, I would have done this. I would have taken him out. And it's like, there was a part of me that was just like, oh, I wish I would have done this or that. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I didn't know if he had a gun. Is it really worth it? And it's like, no. It's fascinating. But in that moment, it's like, there's the part of me, the ego in me, that's like, oh, I wish I would have done that. But like, the way I handled it was the best way, because it's like, it's not worth it.
Yeah. Well, in a lot of situations, the best thing you can do is back away or run. Frankly, take the ego and the pride out of it. There's a lot of, I've had citizens ask me, what should I do if I'm in XYZ situation? Get away from the danger. Like, property is not worth your life. You let them steal it, we all want to be the man and puff out our chests and confront that. But, there's a time and a place for it. And, what I teach my kids, you have kids too. It's like, don't fight unless it's the last resort.
Yeah. Period. To defend yourself. Don't start. 100%. So, having known, personally over the years, first responders, paramedics, cops, and also, several years ago, raising some capital for a particular organization that works specifically in helping first responders through the trauma, right? Again, you're faced with difficult situations. You also see a lot of things, horrific, death, kids die. Just the list goes on and on and on. And there's a lot of trauma and a lot of pain that's associated with that. Do you see, like, with it as a police officer and even working with the first responders, do you still see a lot of people carrying that emotional pain and the trauma of the things that they've seen and experiences.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you never know what somebody's seen and what they've gone through, and also how they interpret those things. And also something to consider is that different types of events affect people differently. So I've gone through a couple things where you might think that must have been your scariest or most gruesome call, or the one that sticks with you the most. And I'm like, no. And I've gone through some other things where you might be like, well, it didn't seem like that should bother you all that much. But it still sticks with me to this day. And I see that with a lot of first responders when I talk to them, because I'm a fitness coach who works with first responders, and they'll tell me about all the things they've seen and they're going through. And you know, you'll meet some people who you think, oh, this guy's as tough as nails, and they are, but there's something inside of them that still eats away at them all the time. It's a huge issue with first responders, PTSD, and the lasting anxiety and depression that comes from all the trauma they've seen. And frankly, they're not getting enough help in general. I mean, the suicide rates amongst cops is just...
And the divorce rate's pretty significantly high, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just how all of that affects, and you're expected... And this is one of the hardest parts about being a first responder. Maybe the hardest. I mean, there's a lot of things, right? But the fact that you're expected to be an excellent professional in so many different types of situations, but go through something very difficult and challenging, something that would ruin the day for a citizen, a normal person, right? And maybe they would just clock out of work and go home that day. But no. You go through that horrible event, and the next minute you're expected to put on a smiley face. And, you know, I think sometimes you get pulled over by a cop who's a dick, right? And you're like, what's wrong with that guy? Maybe he just got spit on. Maybe he just came from a call where he had to try to revive a toddler who drowned, but they're dead, you know, or he had to listen to the screams of the mourning mother who discovered her teenager hung themselves. And now they're driving away, and you're going too fast, and they've been told by their boss, hey, too many people are speeding in this area. We're getting complaints. Please pull people over. Okay, so they're doing their job. And yeah, they're a human being. You know, they're going to react. We expect people to be robots, that they can just wipe a clean slate and act perfectly in the next situation. It can be really difficult.
No, I'm grateful you said that, because there needs to be more grace and compassion for people. I mean, take even road rage, take first responders out of it. You know, it's, you know, someone flips somebody off or gets upset. I mean, I now just smile and wave, because I've actually told myself, I'm like, I don't know if that guy that's angry at me for doing whatever, overreacting in my opinion, right? His wife could have just left him, or he just lost his job, or he's racing to get to, I mean, whatever it is, we just don't know. And people get so caught up in all these moments, and it's like, without having full understanding of it, and, you know, making assumptions. And so, yeah. And again, how can you expect, again, a police officer, because there've been, I mean, I've had moments with cops that have been super nice, and there's others that have been assholes, you know, and the truth is, I don't know what's going on. And of course I'm like, oh, this cop or this or that. And it's like, to put people in a box, you know, that I think is a citizen looking at, like, even over the last few years with so much negativity towards police officers, and, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, all the things that came out of that with defunding police and all of this, you know, again, there's bad apples everywhere. Let's just be clear. I don't care, you know, but all of a sudden the entire group got thrown in, and just, I was just shocked at just watching this. And I'm just like, this, like, how can you just lump everything in? Oh, every cop's a racist, or every cop's this, or every cop's that. And it's like, no, they're not. There are people that are bad, that aren't good people, that are doing things. But you could use that in any industry, in any capacity. And also, I think, understanding what a lot of these men and women deal with, and maybe understanding maybe why they approach situations with a jaded eye, or when they have people constantly coming at them and their life's threatening. And so, yeah, they're going to approach moments. They're going to be more cautious because of experiences. And there just doesn't seem to be any grace or understanding. And I feel like maybe even the industry could do a better job as far as communicating that to the people and try to teach people. It's like, do you really get what we deal with? You know, I think a lot is expected of a police officer, you know, and it's like, you know, here recently, the fires in LA, I mean, horrific, right? But defunding there's a trickle down effect to it. There's a ripple effect to decisions that people make. But I'm sure there were people there that had this whole thing around police officers or fire department, and then all of a sudden their life's in danger. And it's like, I need you, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I think a great theme to take away there is that, there's those cliche sayings like we're all fighting our own battles. But, I actually believe that if, you had that person's genetics and their upbringing and their environment, would you behave differently? I don't think so. You would be them. When we see people react certain ways and act certain ways, we don't understand it from our perspective because we don't know everything that led up to that decision and that reaction that they made. People don't understand famous actors when they're shooing away fans and mad at
The paparazzis.
And the paparazzi. Why are they acting like such a jerk? Maybe that person hasn't been able to go outside in a month without worrying about 25 people surrounding their car and snapping pictures, right? And if we understood everything that led up to that situation, if somehow we could know all the details, even back to their genetics and everything that led up to their decision, then we could probably understand, okay, I get it. I get why you're acting like that.
And I think that's sort of the silver linings and the honestly gifts for when we go through shit in really challenging times. You all of a sudden, create empathy, or, I went through a divorce and, I had my own opinion around divorce or whatever. And then all of a sudden I went through one and it's like, holy shit, I see this totally different now. Right. Mm-hmm. And so after everything I've been through, when I see people or hear so-and-so did this or so-and-so did that, my immediate response today, before it might've been really judgment a little bit. Now it's just like, there's more to this. We just don't know the whole story. Like there's gotta be more. Right. And approach all these situations more with curiosity or understanding or tell me more. And it's like, yeah, as a cop, I can't even imagine like how challenging that is just in that career and just all the things you deal with. Again, you're called when there's problems. There's a lot of criminals, there's a lot of people out there and you deal with a lot of shit.
And what's crazy is cops are expected to be like experts of everything and wear every hat in the book, from consoling somebody to acting like a parent to a kid in a particular situation, to being a fighter and a gunfighter, to medical aid. I mean, everything, right? And you put cops through a 4 to 6 month academy. A lot of it is learning the law and the books, and you're marching and doing stuff. And I still question a lot of it, how useful it really is. But, you expect them to be experts and handle incredibly stressful situations with split-second decisions where lives are in the balance with really minimal training. And now what people are calling for, a lot of people, right, is defunding, pay them less, get rid of them. When in reality, we ought to pay them a lot better. We ought to attract candidates who are better quality. We ought to train them a hell of a lot more. I mean, when you have a doctor performing surgery, they have time, they can pre-plan it, they have people around them that can help them. Yet they make mistakes as well, right, on the operating tables. They're human beings. So, we ought to give cops a lot of grace, honestly. But there are bad ones who are evil and fully intend to do evil, sure, in any career, right? But, I worked with cops. What are cops like? They're people. They're every type of person. You got funny ones, smart ones, dumb ones, impatient ones, patient ones, everything in between. There isn't a type of person that necessarily signs up for that job. And, I think a lot of us sign up for that job for different reasons. But yeah, to your point, you look at general trends, right? Like if somebody is wise and understanding, they have probably gone through a lot of crap in their life. And if somebody who's ignorant and judgmental, they probably aren't understanding. They probably have not been on that side of the fence. And once you experience those challenges more, you become more understanding, right? So like a lot of times they put people through scenarios as if they're cops. They'll give them like the belt with all the tools and the gun and everything. And they have actors, or they have let's say a screen that they can interact with, like a virtual reality. And they go, okay, you're the cop. What are you going to do in this situation? Right. You're dealing with combative people, unpredictable people. Someone pulls a knife, someone pulls a cell phone. What do they do? Right. And so often when you put civilians through these scenarios, afterwards they're like, oh my God, I had no idea, now I have empathy. I can see what it's like. Yeah. People should just listen to cops and maybe comply. So, now that you actually experience the challenge they're going through, just a glimpse, now you're more understanding. Right. And I think that goes for everybody. If you could just put yourself in their shoes for a little bit, encounter the same challenges, you will become more wise and understanding, right?
Yeah. So, today you've got the successful business, Fit Responder. It's an incredible name too. I love that. I've told you that many times.
Yeah.
And for those of you that aren't following, you should follow Ted, Fit Responder on social, posts incredible content for anyone, even if you're not a first responder, but like there's a lot of entertainment on there. And one of the things that I admire that you do is in sometimes gentle, sometimes not so gentle. You just kind of say it how it is, right? But you're targeting working specifically with first responders. And so many times you'll post videos of police officers that are out of shape or extremely out of shape, right? And talk about that, about, how you're going to chase someone down or how you're going to do this if you're completely out of shape. And, do you, and I've seen in comments where, some people, oh yeah. And you get a little bit of pushback on that. It's interesting when you put a mirror on it, people a lot of times have a hard time looking in the mirror, right? And you're casting obviously a wide net to a very, large group of people. Some are triggered by it, some that aren't. But again, if you're a police officer or anyone in that matter, I mean, you're going to be able to do your job better, like if you're in shape.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. I mean, and I've been there. I can understand, and have empathy for somebody who gets out of shape. I was 45 plus pounds overweight and I had high blood pressure, and, I dealt with the comments from inmates who said, hey, fatty, what are you going to do about it? And that sting, and, I know what it's like to not be able to take your shirt off and feel embarrassed to, and all those things. So, it actually helps me be a little bit more comfortable being confrontational and because that kind of content or those types of words helped me. It did. And maybe for some, they don't see it as helpful, but when I got comments like, hey, Ted, like, are you bulking? And they slap my belly as a little joke, but a little bit of a tease or whatever. It reminded me of the problem that I'm not dealing with, and I needed that to change. I needed a few reminders. And finally, when the doctor reminded me with a prescription for my blood pressure, that was when I said, okay, I need to change. And I think, there's no telling what kind of external motivation or reminders people need to begin to change. But criticism can be used as something positive. I mean, it can be used as something to remind you, like, no, this is a problem and I shouldn't sugarcoat it. And frankly, too many people do, right? They excuse themselves and they try to mitigate the how bad of an issue it is, when in reality, someone might need to tell them, hey, no, you are freaking failing, man. And you are failing yourself, your partners, your family by not addressing this issue with more urgency.
Yeah. And a lot of the sugarcoating, and trust me, I've been there. I really appreciate candor and directness today. I didn't used to. They used to just trigger me and like, right. Oh, you're a dick, you're whatever. And it's like, and it would trigger something to me. And I've done enough work and have enough awareness now that any trigger that I feel, any reaction I have to anything anyone says, I am in some way or another connecting to what they're saying. There's something inside of it, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And, for example, when I was 350 pounds, if someone mentioned anything around weight, even if it wasn't about me, I got insecure. Oh, they're talking about me. They're talking about me, or if somebody said somebody's fat. And if someone came out to me today and said, hey, you're fat, it would go in one ear and not the other. I don't connect with it. That's not who I am today. Right.
Right.
But I found, especially with men, I mean, I have clients like this. My default is not to be confrontational or overly direct, just like, yes, candid, but not, the delivery, right? Not this alpha, like just calling a spade. But I found that there's been moments, even in my own life, that I will connect into a message like that is so direct, that is so raw, that there's no sugarcoating, and it stings. Yeah. And there's moments where that's necessary. I think it can be a jolt. It can be a wake-up call, and then there's others that are repelled by it.
Yeah.
And I think, and we all connect in different. We don't, and it's okay that it's okay for one person, so not okay for another. Yeah. But as you've done that and I've watched you do that, as I'm also figuring out this whole social game, it's interesting that it's like it brings different people out, triggers one, and then it really helps another.
Yeah. Well, and frankly, social media, it's a lot of mindless scrolling. And sometimes you need to be pretty harsh, pretty direct, pretty controversial to catch people's attention. And I think for the most part, people are too often excused and given a pass by their loved ones and their friends and family because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. If you like them, you're not going to tell them, hey man, like you've really let yourself go and you look sloppy as hell and you don't look professional. And I'm worried if you're going to be able to do this job. Like no one's saying that to anybody, but like, and if you don't hear that, and if that's not something that you're confronted with and you're excusing yourself constantly, hey, I'm just a big guy. That's just my genetics. I still got it. If I'm going to, if I have to get into the mix, I'll have adrenaline that'll help me. If you're not confronted with the truth, like, you may very well never change. Okay. So like, yeah, I'll be direct and harsh a lot of the times and not to hurt feelings. I don't mean to be mean and it's not, I don't get joy out of poking fun, let's say. But yeah, I think a lot of people need to hear the truth, and the truth can really hurt. And they need to see how serious their situation is in order to take action to change. If you don't see your situation as something that's serious that needs to change, it's unlikely that you're going to take the right kind of action.
I agree. It's until the pain of, the pain of the current situation, wherever we happen to be, exceeds the pain of change. People will not change. They stay where they're at, especially men. I mean, that's why so many times it has to get so bad before they actually change. And unfortunately, whatever it happens to be, when we're talking about fitness here, there's so much collateral damage as a result of that. And so it's like, sometimes that direct conversation can wake somebody up. It's like, listen, you're headed this way. Like you need to change or else. And yeah. And again, you said this, the truth hurt. Being radically honest and radically truthful can be very painful, especially to the loved ones, but it also sets you free. And the hardest person, I say this all the time, that we have ever faced, currently face or will ever face is ourselves. And it's being radically accountable and really just telling ourselves the truth instead of a story or excuses as to why, in this case, why I'm not in shape. Well, we could always list the things. At the end of the day, I'm not prioritizing it. If I could go back to my 350-pound self, before the pain of where I was exceeded, that actually put me on a trajectory to change. If I was being honest with me back then, you don't want it bad enough. I didn't want it bad enough. Even though I was miserable. Yes,
100%. And something that's kind of related to that too is that if we're not putting responsibility on ourselves, it's almost impossible to change, right? If we're saying, well, if we're deflecting it, it's the job that's causing it. It's my genetics. It's whatever. It's my thyroid. I mean, all the excuses, right? If you're putting the blame there, and you're pushing the pain of the problem away, and you're pushing the responsibility of changing it, if you're pushing that away as well, at what point are you going to change? But what I've noticed from all the clients I've worked with who have gotten fit and healthy and made incredible transformation, the real transformation starts with them saying, this situation is horrible and I can't allow it to continue. And it is my responsibility right now to take some action. And don't get me wrong, the challenges are real, like the shift work. Sure, genetics is a factor that definitely influences us and the environment and the stress and whatever else, and the lack of food options when it's 2 a.m. and you're driving around in your patrol car. I get it. These are all real challenges, but we have to be able to say, these are challenges that I can confront and actively work on and still improve despite them. And it is urgent enough and necessary enough for me to change right now. So that's why my content is, hey, hey, buddy, you need to change. This is how you're failing everybody, including yourself, if you don't. And then, putting the responsibility in their court. Yes, these challenges are real, but it's up to you to take major action to change.
Yeah. No, taking radical accountability. I'm curious, what do you see? I mean, you obviously have this niche industry, right? And yes, there's different circumstances like shift work and different things that they're dealing with, but yet I believe first responders, business people, I mean, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like we all there's an underlying theme, why people are overweight, and I think you can find general themes in that. I mean, there's unique circumstances. One of the things that I have found, even in the men that I'm working with, and one of the advantages it is to, hire a personal trainer and, an individual or a team to work with you, is just having an accountability partner.
Yeah.
I mean, that's as much that, and I'm finding they appreciate that and want that as much as all the time that goes into the workouts, that goes into the meal plan and the nutrition. It's just having someone there to help hold them accountable.
Absolutely. Well, and here's an analogy that I like to think about, and this helps really paint the picture. If you look at, let's say, something like Alcoholics Anonymous, All right. You have accountability, right? Because you have a group, a mentor, right? You're expected to show up to your meetings, and you also have a plan of action. But what is their plan of action really? I mean, it's literally just don't drink alcohol. And yeah, you can make it more nuanced, like, okay, well, if you're at a party, hold a cup with some soda in it so you feel more kind of, well, yeah, I guess there's some planning there, but it's far less complicated than nutrition and training and, okay, what kind of diet, what types of foods, how much protein, right? Yet look how much those people with their addiction, which can be a major addiction. And frankly, if you're overweight and obese, you have some form of an addiction. I mean,
100%.
You do. So my point is that their form of accountability and how effective it is shows how important it is. Because I think a lot of people, when they're looking at a fitness coach or a personal trainer, well, they're like, okay, well, what's this person going to teach me that I don't know? Like, I already know I need to eat X grams of protein, or I already know how to work out, whatever, but they're completely discounting how important accountability is. Having somebody who's with you, who's been there before, who's helped people like you before, who understands your challenges, who can help you navigate through those challenges and expects you to show up and cares about you. I mean, all of those factors matter. And just another point to drive this home, think about all of the fields we want people to succeed in, whether it's education or whether it's, their career path or whatever, there's accountability in it. We expect you to show up. Sports, we expect you to be at practice on time, right? If we didn't have accountability and you just left it up to them, hey, here's the plan of action, good luck. How effective would people be at the workforce, right? How effective would people be as athletes, even if they really want it and they want to be successful? If you don't have somebody watching over their shoulder, making sure they don't cut corners and making sure that they're showing up, you're not likely to be successful. So I think we all need that, no matter how proud you are and you want to be a lone wolf, whatever. You got to realize the most successful people really rely on accountability. They all have coaches. They have mentors.
Every high achiever I know in any aspect of life has a coach.
Every single
one of them.
Yep.
Kobe Bryant talks about having everybody. It doesn't matter. Like if you're a high achiever, you've got a coach.
Sometimes multiple coaches.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I've got 2 or 3 right now. I mean, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on coaching accountability, and it's the accountability. There is something to that. And again, if I can also go on YouTube, I can research all these things. I mean, now in today's world, there's AI tools now that can create an entire workout program, whatever, right? And it's like, I have one guy I've been talking to about that, and he's just like, well, I can do all this online. I'm like, well, why haven't you done it yet?
Right.
And it's like, well, in this scarcity mindset around money. And to me, it's like, it's invaluable. It's priceless. Like, especially for someone like me, if you've got someone that can hold you accountable and, in my case, lose over 100 pounds, I mean, that you can't even quantify the value in that. I mean, literally for me and my health, I mean, it's literally millions and millions of dollars. So if I'm going to pay someone a few $1,000s to kind of get me there, like the exponential return to me as a client is far beyond whatever dollar amount I'm paying.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen that so many times in my own life. And even the mentors and coaches who I didn't like, and we've talked about this before, I still got value from it. I learned something from them. There was something about that experience, and maybe it helps me be a better coach or mentor towards others because I can see some of the ways they did or did not do things. So I get value from all of it. I mean, you've said this, like the struggles and the pain we go through can be lessons, and, the coaches I've had and all of their different perspectives, and that was one of my original challenges when I was in my mid-20s and I was overweight. I said, I'm a personal trainer. Like, I have this background. I should be able to do this on my own. Why can't I do this? And finally, I just bit the bullet, listened to some good instruction from my girlfriend, who's my now wife, and coaches at the time. And I realized actually there's a lot of things I can learn. And actually accountability is extremely important.
It's huge. And yeah, and I'm the same way. I mean, I'm as a personal trainer myself, and I have a coach, in what I'm doing now. And it's like, there's different ways of looking at different things. But for me, the thing with him, it's the accountability. Yeah. It's like, I have to submit pictures every Wednesday, follow the plan. Like, there was one time we submitted pictures. He asked me this. He's like, do you feel thinner? Or whatever, leaner, I think is what he said. And I'm like, yeah, I feel about the same. He goes, well, you're not. Just checked me. And I remember laughing out loud, and I'm just like, this is so funny, but I'm like, okay, fair. I'll get checked. Like, and then I had to reflect my week, and I'm like, well, if I'm being really truly radically honest with myself, like there were a couple of days where I wasn't, following the plan, whatever. So, and the picture showed you can't, you can't lie about it. So I just, there's so much beauty around accountability, and it's ultimately there to help us be better. I mean, one of the things that I love that you do when your onboarding process of bringing on a new client is you actually ask them, how do you want me to communicate to you? So, what we were talking about earlier, some people want the like brash, like give it to me, give it to me, give it to me, right? Versus others that are like, be a little bit more gentle. And I just love that you're actually taking the time and the initiative to ask them how you want to communicate to them, and again, in the spirit of accountability, if someone chooses, hey, no, be harsh, call me out, and you're calling them out and they have a whole thing about it, you can just bring it back. I'm like, okay, I'm showing up the way you asked me to, but I just, again, the more it's accountability, it's getting to know the client. And I believe we all want to be seen and understood.
Yeah.
And one of the beautiful things you do in this very large market, I mean, there's a million personal trainer and this market's massive. But again, one of the things that you do and that I do is like, we're really targeting a specific niche that we know.
Yeah.
I think the word I know, people say, oh, I know this or I know that. Like knowledge is, from my perspective, my definition, the only way you can know something is if you've experienced it, right? I don't know what it's like to be a police officer. I could build a meal plan and a workout plan for a cop, but at the end of the day, I don't know all the inner workings because I haven't been there. There's multiple personal trainers out there that have never been out of shape, and they could have worked with, hundreds, if not thousands of people, and they have lots of experience with different people, and they can say they quote unquote know. But if they've never been overweight or morbidly overweight, at the end of the day, they really don't know. You yourself, targeting first responders, you were 45 pounds overweight. So you've experienced, so you can connect with them in that. And that's the power of like, for anyone looking for a personal coach, or whatever it happens to be in, life coaching, or in this case, fitness coaching, is find somebody that knows you, that can experience. Again, circumstances are different, but like, because then there's empathy and there's understanding, and also in the spirit of accountability, you might be able to tell a story to somebody else that you're not going to be able to tell, someone that knows it really well or can challenge you, with limiting beliefs or stories. There's just so much power in working with people that have walked the path before.
100%. Well, and one of the biggest things that inspired me to start Fit Responder, I remember I had a coach and he had me on a very bodybuilder-esque plan where I had to eat every 2 hours, and I had a stopwatch that alerted me when it was time to eat, the chicken and rice and, X amount of almonds, and it's pretty strict. And I remember I was on a call. There was like a traffic collision, and I was directing traffic for like 7 hours. And I was like, hey coach, I missed meals, 4 and 5, because I had XYZ going on. Sorry about that. And his response was, oh, I guess you don't want this bad enough. Right. And okay, maybe he was intending to motivate me, give me a little jab to get me to try harder. But what I saw this guy has never been a first responder and he doesn't understand, right? And I thought, imagine if the coach said, hey, don't worry about it. I get that. I've been there. Totally understand that. Here's what we're going to do next time. Or here's how we can tweak the plan to make it account for situations like that. And here's what you can do now, like practical responses. And that's what really got me motivated, is I clearly remember being like, man, imagine if, my coach actually understood what my life was like and what my career was like. And I've seen that play out so many times with my clients, first responders, and all the stuff they deal with. And how many times they're like, I'm so grateful I have a coach who can get it, who can understand what I'm going through. So yeah, to your point, like you need to get guidance from somebody who's been there at the very least has helped many people who've gone through similar challenges that you have.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And again, just one more point on this. I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, you could take a divorce attorney, for example, that's worked with thousands of couples, right? That just knows it intimately well. And I actually know someone personally that had done that and then went through their own divorce. And then after the fact was like, you know what? Like there's a part of this that I didn't know.
Yeah, you got to experience it firsthand. And that's why I love that you help guys who want to lose a massive amount of weight. And if there's somebody who's looking to lose 100 pounds, you can say, I've lost more than 100 pounds of fat. I mean, that's not a 3-4 month journey.
It's several years in the making. And yeah. And the guys that I'm working with, I've got several guys that have, that type of weight to lose. And it's interesting, even when I ask them initially, it's like, what's your target weight? and it's the target weight for some of these guys is still what I would consider obese, pretty heavy. And as I kept asking more and more questions, they don't even believe that they can actually reach that other weight. They don't think it's possible.
Right.
So, it's interesting. Like, I've, even with some of the men that I work with, when we're talking about relationship stuff and how their marriages is, and I had one guy I was working with, I'm like, so how are things? Like, how are things in your marriage? He goes, they're good. So I drew this diagram on the board, and I can't remember exactly how I did it. It was like thriving at the top, good, not good, or excuse me, just not, no, it was thriving, good, not bad, bad, and we started talking, really, he opened up, it just wasn't not bad. And not bad felt a lot better than bad because they'd been in a bad space. So in his eyes, like, oh, it's just this element of reprieve, like, this feels good. But if he's being honest, it really isn't good. It's just not bad, and you can flip that with fitness. It's like, oh, take a guy that's, say his target weight is 200 pounds and he weighs 300, he wants to weigh 260. Well, obviously 40 pounds less is going to be significant from where he currently is. But at the end of the day, like, he really needs to weigh 200 to be healthy. Right. And they just don't even believe it. And that's the power. And, when my big thing with setting goals, I mean, especially when someone has a lot of weight to lose, the number's so daunting, how much time is so daunting. It just takes forever. And my whole thing is like, listen, we're taking this at a day at a time. What can you do today?
Yeah.
Micro changes lead to massive results. And before you know it, you're going to get there. But when we can stay focused on just today, you got to go for 10,000 steps. You need to eat. Here's your nutrition plan, get this workout in, no matter what it is. It's like, that's all you need to do. Don't worry about, because it will come off. You will lose it as long as you stay consistent and disciplined. That's what you said at the beginning. Like, the formula is not that overly complicated. It's just stick to it and you're going to get the results. It's like, literally, it's guaranteed.
Yeah. And that's a great practical tip, is we ought to focus on the process and not the results or the goals, because, it can be frustrating if you're 300 pounds and you see that 100-pound goal in front of you and it looks like a massive mountain to climb. Yeah, and it feels impossible because you've been overweight your whole life. You've never done it. Every time you've tried, you can't break 20 pounds weight loss. So it just feels insurmountable, and it can feel daunting. But yeah, if you just focus on the process, like, just look, the goal isn't 100 pounds lost. The goal is be consistent now in this moment. Do the things you need to do. At every opportunity that you can, do what you ought to do that, and you will win. I mean, put your blinders on. You're eventually going to win, certainly. But yeah, there's times where I've had to take the scale away from clients and say, I don't want you to even weigh yourself anymore, because they're so focused. Oh my gosh, my scale weight didn't move this week, even though I've been perfect. And it's like, well, yeah, that's not how weight loss works. You can't expect it to just be a straight shot downward. I mean, there's so many factors that affect weight loss, but look, focus on the damn process. Just, did you get your steps in? Did you bring your meals to work? We got that 20-minute workout in and you drank your water. Excellent. All right, let's do it. Day 2, and eventually they'll become believers once they break that.
Yeah. It's such a psychological game. What's coming to mind is like, when I graduated from high school, I had this psychological attachment to 270 pounds. So I was 270 when I graduated from high school, lost a bunch of weight, would blow through it. And then I'd get to 270, I could go on Oprah for how much weight I've gained and lost over the years. But it was interesting as when I was over 270, I'd get to that 270 and was like, I had this whole thing, this story in my head that's like, and I'd drop down, but I'd always go right back up to it. And at the end, when I was going through a divorce, I blew through it. But even when I was losing my weight and getting down to it, I had this whole story around 270 pounds. And getting through that, it was this psychological barrier as far as like in my head, like, no, there's a new baseline. So then it became 260, and then it became 250, and then it became 240. But it became uncharted waters for me, like, because there were so many limiting beliefs, and I'd obviously hit these lower weights from time to time, but I never maintained it. I never sustained it, but again, the process, falling in love with I love the process now, like the journey of it. It's just a day at a time. And then, you look back, especially, that's why I love, you do this with clients, so do I, is like taking pictures, because many times, I had a guy this last week that didn't lose any weight, but his pictures, his back fat, significant. You can see significant changes in his body, even though the scale doesn't represent it. So pictures can also help hold accountability and actually show progress, even if the scale doesn't show it. But yeah, it's consistency and falling in love with the process. And again, the thing I love about it, as long as you're doing it, it's inevitable. It will happen.
Yep.
Like, it's a tweak here, a tweak there. And it's just, yeah, that's what I say. You've got, guaranteed result. I've got guaranteed result. I mean, if you follow it, you're going to have success.
100%. Yeah. There's never been a case I've come across where you don't get the results when you follow the process.
So what's in store for Ted Stern here over the, in the coming months and year?
That's a great question. I have some personal work to do. It's like I've experienced this thing. I guess I'll get pretty personal here. As you grow and you evolve, you're thinking about, hey, if I achieve X, then I'll be happy. Like when I get, I remember struggling with depression as a kid and being like, once I get jacked and muscular, I'll be happy. Once I get a good career that I'm proud of, I'll be happy. Once I get a beautiful wife and I have beautiful kids, I've actually achieved all of that. Like I've achieved every goal that I thought would make me happy. And although I'm in a much better place than I've been in the past in a lot of ways, I'm still like, what's the thing that's going to make like really, I don't know, just make me feel completely fulfilled and whole. And I struggle with that because I'm very happy with my job and I'm very happy with my family and my kids, but there's something there. And this is a philosophical question that I don't have the answer to. Maybe there is nothing that will just make you feel totally at peace, like these monks that are like, all right, my life's complete. Like I've figured it all out. Maybe there's always going to be a void, some kind of emptiness that drives you, that gets you to seek more. I mean, you see that with a lot of high achievers, right? They're never happy. It's like I watched this documentary on Aaron Rodgers, and he talks about how disappointed he was throughout his career that he couldn't get X number of Super Bowls, right? And you hear about Michael Jordan where he talked crap to himself, and in his head he's like, you suck. And it's like, I guess for me, what's in store is finding that balance between being dissatisfied enough to want to achieve more and continue and stuff, but also being grateful for what I have, because I've hit the lottery in life for sure. I know that. I'm so lucky. I'm so fortunate. So yeah, balancing those two things is what I'm looking for. I mean, I could get into specifics like, I want to make more money and then find good investments. And I have little goals like that. And then, help people with their own fitness coaching offers and stuff. But yeah, I think that's the big theme for me.
No, I thank you for being open. A lot's coming to mind. And I think this, especially for men, right? In the pursuit of wealth and success. And then we hit, this happened to me, like on this trajectory of like needing more and more and more and not realizing at the time, but there were other voids in my life. And I was trying to fill that void in the pursuit of wealth. The more I get this, the more I get that, the more I get this. And I couldn't fill it. Like, and there's a ton of men like this. Or when I know so many guys, coming from the investment world, these guys that have these massive exits, and it's like, hey, when I finally sell, then I'm going to be happy. But then along the way, there was this path of destruction that they couldn't make up, whether it was in their relationships or their kids or all these different things. Or in many cases, they got it and they thought they were going to feel this new euphoria, this new sense of being. And it wasn't what they thought it was going to be or they had set on. And the fact that it wasn't created depression. Like, wait a minute, I've put my whole life onto this and all of a sudden I have it. And it's like, I feel no different. In fact, I actually feel worse. I thought my whole life was going to change.
That alone could make somebody depressed.
100%. And, you use the word balance. My belief is I don't think balance exists. I think what we're ultimately trying to achieve is harmony, right? And having a sense of purpose. And I truly believe that like you can find inner peace and not have to be a monk, and I believe like when we have those moments of like, there's something missing or I'm not filled, satisfied or purpose, whatever the emotion has to be, that's the universe's way of saying there's something to look at. So to approach it with curiosity. And I just think like, I think why a lot of people go through it, I'm not suggesting this, I'm saying in general, why people go through a midlife crisis or different things happen because all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I thought I had it all and I don't. And my belief is those, 180s, if you will, in the outcome that we thought didn't, produce the results or the feelings around it is really just like, again, changing the perspective, changing the story around it. And yeah, and I think like you and I on this like soul searching way to like really find who we are as men. And I think this is for men and women. I can't speak for women, I can speak for men. This is something that comes up in our age, like where people really like, what's my purpose? What is all this for? It's like, I've got all these things that I never thought hitting the lottery. And it's like, why am I still feeling a little unsatisfied or this or that? And unfortunately what people do is they keep pursuing more of what they already have and they get more and more. In reality, there's these other areas of life, that we need to look at or address. And so you're not alone. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we all want harmony. We all want peace, and that looks different for everybody. And a lot of it, I believe, when we're presented with these setbacks or these feelings, there's different modalities and ways to get there, but that's the universe is calling, like, hey, there's something else here more for you to look at. There's something else here to look at. There's a story that you have that's not serving you,
Yeah. I also look at it too, like if you think about our ancestors, it wouldn't serve your survival to be like, I got enough. Would it? Right? Because if you got a squirrel who goes, yeah, I got enough nuts, I'm cool, but they're wrong. And then the winter lasts longer than they thought, and that's death. Right. So actually it makes sense in a purely biological, evolutionary, whatever perspective, that you ought to be a little dissatisfied if you're going to be a survivor and someone who's successful. 100%. Because the squirrel who has a ton of nuts, more than enough nuts, and is like, I don't have enough, and is stressed out about it, that drives them to acquire more nuts. Well, they're going to be safe, and their squirrel family is going to be safe, more so than the person. Because I actually know a real guy who is broke, and he oftentimes doesn't have gas money. And if I were living in his shoes, I'd be stressed as hell. I would be depressed, anxious. Oh my gosh, I got to be working at 2 a.m. to make up for this deficit. He's like, I'm cool. I'm kind of jealous of him in a sense, because he's like, it's whatever. Like I'm cool with this. I'm happy. He seems happy, but that leaves him with a lot of risk. Like, he could break his leg and he wouldn't have his job anymore, and he'd probably be homeless if his friends and family didn't help him. So I think the balance or harmony is somewhere in there, right? It's like you have to be a little dissatisfied to want to achieve more. You don't want that to consume you.
And I would say you got to be a little uncomfortable, right?
You have to be uncomfortable.
I had what's coming to mind too, and this was just your example of this gentleman that looks at life that way. I had a guy that worked for me years ago at my investment firm. He came over. We had all these incredible systems and all these things that could just literally, maximize his efficiency. He could be making double or triple what he was making. And he was a Lone Ranger, old school, had to do everything himself. And he was just throwing a kink in our system and was pissing everybody off. So I finally sat down with him and I looked at him like, we're going through everything. And I just asked him point blank, I'm like, do you want to make more money? And he looked at me, he goes, you know what? I don't. And it just blew my mind. I wasn't ready for that answer. He's like, I'm satisfied. Like, I'm happy where I'm at. I'm comfortable. And it was really eye-opening to me, because I don't look at it that way. I'm wired more like you. It's like, well, get to this goal and this goal, this goal, this goal. Part of it, that's just, I'm wired that way, and I just like how I feel when I'm doing that. But it was just an interesting dynamic. Like, we don't all see things the same way. Yeah. And in the business community, I noticed with a lot of the sales guys and people that I've worked with over the years, it's like they'd hit a certain threshold where they're quote unquote comfortable, and they just coast. Yep. Or many times I've seen guys where they're uncomfortable and they work their ass off to get to a certain point. Then they coast, and then all of a sudden when they run out of money, it was funny. My dad, old school way, was that way. Years ago, at the time I was Mormon. I was on an LDS mission, on a Mormon mission in Argentina, and I got an email or a letter at the time. They didn't email, but they had a letter from my brother, and he's like, hey, Dad's a drug dealer. Like, he closed his office. He's not even working. And I just started laughing, and he'd made a bunch of money on a commission deal. And literally, instead of just like celebrating it, my dad closed his office like for 3 months, spent all the money. And then when he ran out of money, went back to work. And I just think but he's not unique in that. Everybody looks at it different. I'm like, it's just fascinating to me. And there's so many people that are wired like that, And so, and I think in some cases you either have it or you don't. And of course, each one of us are on our own unique journey, and like what resonates with you might not resonate with me. But the overwhelming theme, as far as like, again, balance, harmony, whatever the word is, I think we all want that. I think many times to embrace some of these things requires going down rabbit holes that we might not want to go down and face certain things. And so people don't want to face that side of it, but there's so much freedom in doing that. And so I honor where you're at, and, other conversations we've had outside of this. So yeah, this next season for you is going to be, I'm going to use the word transformational.
I think so. I can see that on the horizon. I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, just real quick, just going back to the offensive content I put out there on social media, right? If you're out of shape, let's say objectively obese, okay, medically obese, whatever. But you consider yourself, you love the way you look, you don't care, you feel great. And if that's really your truth, then my offensive content won't bother you. Okay. If I'm like, oh, look, this sloppy cop, this sloppy firefighter, whatever, it's not going to bother you because you're not going to see it as a problem. But if you do see it as a problem and it bothers you, that it is poking at that part of you that maybe you don't want to address, that this is something that you don't like about yourself. So what can you do? Work on changing it. Take some responsibility and make it happen.
So Ted, where can our listeners follow you and your journey and all the great things you're doing?
Appreciate that. Yeah, different. I mean, you can go to fitresponder.com. That's easy. You can check out my Instagram, which is at fitresponder, FITRESPONDER. I got an email, ted@fitresponder. You could do that. So I would say that. You could search us on YouTube. I'm starting a channel. Would definitely appreciate any subscribers and followers. So
yeah. Again, Ted's an incredible man doing some incredible work, and whether you're first responder or not, like you're going to get a lot of information, a lot of practical things that you could apply to your life, and he will poke the bear a few times, which I love. And if you're reacting to it, it's something you need to look at. Ted, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you all next time on the Burn Up Podcast.